Yeah. That kind of tees up a question I had for you. When I look back at the people that inspired me really deeply to get into independent media, and, obviously Gavin and I were never going to get hired by MSNBC. Look at us. But, the people who were like,
They'd be smart.
maybe I could get in this was obviously we were big secular talk fans, as we mentioned, but I spent so much time my senior year of high school, early on in college, humping jobs listening to the Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, a lot. I mean, I probably listened to that man talk more than my own father. Okay. It's serious, the level of appeal that he had to people at that time. This was probably 2015, 2016 when I was a real head, all the way to 2018. Right.
Wow.
And I would say, in a way that I can't explain, it hurts me so badly to see what happens to this guy, because I always believed deep down that he was one of the good ones, that he was this guy that even if he was rough around the edges, even if he reminded me a lot of some of the dads that I grew up around, where it was like they didn't understand shit, like they don't understand trans people, but they're like, who cares, bro? Let them live. Like, that's what I always envisioned for Joe. And then he got the Spotify contract, and it's $100 million. And I don't know if you'd attribute it to that. I don't know if you would attribute it to the social isolation in Austin, Texas. I don't know if you would attribute it to him being a lot more effective of a con man than I ever realized. And here he is now. He sees an opportunity and he wants to be the biggest and he wants to be relevant and he doesn't want to fall off. And so he goes for it. But he's completely abandoned and betrayed everything that I feel like once made him special. And he's just become a mouthpiece for bigots. He defended Elon sig hailing. He had Mel fucking Gibson on his podcast to say that climate change wasn't real. And the big scam was green energy companies that were trying to scam our kids so they could make money off of it. This is a man I know knows better, because I was inspired by him when he had Shane Smith on his podcast all those years ago to be like, dude, this is an insanely important issue we have to talk about. And Joe was like, wow, dude, we got to do something about this. This is crazy. And I was like, we have to do something about this. This is crazy. So what is your analysis of the unmaking of Joe Rogan? And how do you put it in perspective in your own mind as somebody who gave him the benefit of the doubt when a lot of people were criticizing him?
Yeah. And, I still feel like torn, not really torn at this point, but I feel bad because Joe was really good to me and Sagar when we launched Breaking Points, right? And I do appreciate that. I am grateful for that. But bottom line is, it's a rich guy in a bubble who goes off of like vibes versus any sort of facts or ideology. So, he's, I think, quite emblematic actually of the Bernie to Trump pipeline, where it was like, shifted right from backing Bernie Sanders to now based on the like vibes. I think he feels like it's like cool and punk rock, even said this on his show, to support Trump and all this parade of horribles around him. And is now his podcast is like the #1 platform where oligarchs go on to like launder their reputations and try to enlist MAGA in some like, pro-rich class war by telling them it's really about some cultural, like, oh, they're debanking conservatives. That's why we need to get rid of the CFPB. That's what his podcast has become. And it's terrible. Like, it's really sad to see. It's bad for the country. And I think it was interesting to me. Probably the most revealing thing I saw is I don't know if you guys covered this. I'm sure you saw it though. Is he recently was like, oh, I'm not really a Republican or a Democrat. I think they all have some good
bullshit
ideas. It's like, dude, you baked that cake is baked now. You can't go endorse Trump, have him on your podcast, not push back, have all of his sycophants on your podcast, launder their reputations, go schmooze with them at the inauguration, and then still come back. Oh, I'm an independent guy. No. You're not. Like, that ship has sailed. This is who you are now. You are an establishment Republican in league with the most powerful people on the planet. Like, all your conspiracy theorizing about how the powerful want to do this, those are your guys. Like, those are the guys that you're giving a platform to and helping in their plans of extraction and exploitation and world domination. Like, you're in league with them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the explanation for like how he ends up in this place, but I think, like I said, it's just like a rich guy in a bubble whose obvious media consumption habits are horrific. Is incredibly gullible, will believe anything that happens to fit into his worldview and not check it before it rolls out of his mouth whatsoever. And now happens to be incredibly powerful and influential, where this is very, very damaging thing to do.
Yeah, I think for me, the first time that it really clicked with me that it was over for Joe Rogan and that he really doesn't mean much of anything that he says these days is actually when he interviewed Donald Trump and basically didn't bring up the vaccine or COVID at all, didn't push back on Trump's handling of that situation at all. Because again, it wasn't that long ago that Joe Rogan decided to turn his entire show into the let's bitch about the vaccine hour. Let's complain about the response to COVID, the lockdowns, Dr. Fauci, lab leak, etc. Which again is all valid to talk about. I actually defended his right to do it. I said it was crazy that anyone on the left advocated for his censorship in that moment. I said, hey, this is a dramatic thing that's happening in society. People have the right to talk about it. People have the right to, talk about conspiratorial shit if they want to. Let's not advocate for censorship, right? But I really thought that Joe Rogan took that seriously. I really thought that it was something that kind of broke his brain, that, completely made him change the way he thought about politics. Again, the response to COVID, the lack of freedom, the, lockdowns, the vaccine mandates, et cetera, et cetera. But then he has Donald Trump on his podcast for a 3-hour-long conversation. Donald Trump is the guy who was president when that happened. Donald Trump is the guy who instituted the lockdowns, who did Operation Warp Speed, did the mandates. Joe Biden is the guy who said COVID is over. And Joe Rogan doesn't even bring it up once. He doesn't even bring it up once to Trump's face. He doesn't say, hey, if there's another pandemic, are you going to do this again? Are you going to have a different plan? No, it's just complete crickets, not even the ability to ask a single tough question, even about the thing that, like I said, he spent 2 or 3 years harping on endlessly. I'm sure everyone remembers the ivermectin. Maybe I should sue CNN because they said I took horse dewormer or some shit like that. So what was your reaction to that? Do you think that Joe ever actually really cared about the COVID stuff as much as he pretended to?
My read is a little different. I think he does care about it, but I think the vibes are that that's a Democrat liberal thing and not a right-wing Trump thing. So even though the facts are exactly as you laid out, he didn't feel like that was a thing to challenge Trump on because it's right-wing coded. So that's more of my read of that situation. And, he's always had this shtick of, I'm just a comedian. Like, you can't take me too serious. And it's like, okay, that's all well and good until you're interviewing the fucking president of the United States. And then guess what? You do have some responsibility to do some research and plan some pushbacks and have some difficult questions. Yes, that is incumbent upon you if you're going to accept that opportunity to interview the, candidate for the president of the United States and the former president of the United States. So I do think he believes it. I just think that he gets captured by what's right-wing coded and what's left-wing coded. And he doesn't associate that with Donald Trump, even though it was literally Donald Trump who thankfully did Operation Warp Speed and developed the vaccines. It is just one thing I've been thinking about is one time when Sagar and I were on, I don't remember all the details of the conversation, but January 6th came up and Sagar said something that felt to him like it was downplaying it. And Joe actually jumped in and corrected Sagar. He's like, that was really terrible. That was bad. That was a bad thing that happened. And, kind of checked Sagar on that. So to see him go from that to now oh, maybe I'll do some shows at Mar-a-Lago and here I am at the inauguration, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, this is wild. This is really wild. But just don't, all these guys that are, Tucker and all these people that pretend like they're some independent thinkers or Barry Weiss, is throwing an inauguration party with Uber and laundering deep state talking points to push war with Iran, etc. It's like, okay, you don't get to wear the independent label anymore. You are Republican, right-wing, apparatchiks, and Trump hacks. That's what you are. So own it and live with it and deal with it.
Yeah. Well, some people in our chat, Krystal, the other day when we were talking about breaking points, leveled a similar allegation as Sagar. They said, this guy has been honest about the fact that he's friends with JD Vance, that he knows some of these people. Are you worried that his independence as it relates to the Republican Party is at risk of disappearing due to those connections? Or do you think he's really committed to, being above it and having integrity when he discusses the potential threats to the populace of this country as they come from the right-wing Republican Party?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that with JD Vance, the vice president of the United States, that changes Sagar's positioning. He no longer is that just pure outsider. And we all, of course, I am friends with Chuck Rocha and friends with David Sirota and, new people on the Bernie Sanders campaign, but never have had these links with, the actual parties that are in the White House, et cetera. And so I think
weren't getting down and cutting a rug.
Weren't secretly, and I do think about imagine that I went to was besties with Kamala, so like it would be a
Tim
thing.
Walz, yeah.
I would actually kind of like to be besties with Tim Walz. Maybe I could still make that happen. But I think it's a challenging position for him. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I know, he's doing his best to navigate it. He's obviously always been really super upfront about who he knows and who he's friends with and how that can impact his views, et cetera. And I think that's the best you can do. And then you also have to try to check your own personal relationship biases. And, that's the most that you can ask for. One thing that has been useful in terms of the show is that it's the first time that we really do have kind of insights into some of these like weird, MAGA behind the scenes fights that are breaking out. So that's one of the things that he really wants to try to bring to the table, is to have that insight into some of these wars within the different coalitions within MAGA. But I don't, that viewer isn't wrong to point out, it definitely is a challenging position for him, and something that we as a show are going to have to navigate moving forward, because he's known JD Vance for years and years.
Yeah, are they like really good friends? Like, do they hang out? Not that you have to disclose it, obviously, but I'm just interested.
I'm not sure how exactly Sagar would characterize the relationship. They're definitely friends. He's very close with JD's chief of staff. They are like, I know he spoke to him the weekend of the inauguration. I don't think he would mind me revealing that. So it's someone who he's still definitely in touch with. I don't think they're like, besties,
right,
but they definitely have a friendly relationship. And so yeah, it's a different situation for him, and it's going to be some challenging terrain for him and for us as a show to be able to navigate in a way that people feel like we're being ethical and being upfront, et cetera.
Right. And I agree, by the way, about the insights it offers, you guys into that world. I think that there already have been a couple of instances where I've noticed on Breaking Points that, Sagar clearly has some interesting insights as a result of that connection. I also think that it's fair to point out, as you did, that, Bernie Sanders had become the president. Obviously, Nina Turner, Chuck Rocha,
right,
some of these people too. So it's obviously not like Sagar knew that JD Vance was going to get picked.
Yeah.
If anything, probably was a little bit annoyed. Like, now I have to talk about my friend on air, I would imagine.
Yeah,
but
to be honest with you, yes, that was kind of the reaction. It's like, oh, makes it more awkward, because there are going to be times, there have been times where he's been critical of their approach and things that they've done already in this administration. And so, it's you guys know, when it's someone it's just harder. Like,
we were making the comparison the other day. Yeah, we were 100%. And I think it's actually an admirable quality to have in somebody that would have to balance that and then choose to still be consistent and do the show the way they know they need to do the show.
Well, last one, deal with me like out there, like, fuck these guys,
dude. Fuck yeah, dude. And thank God for it. You know what? And also, I know he's got a brigade of people behind the scenes at Breaking Point who don't always agree with him either. So.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir.